My guest today is Tony Whatley, a business mentor, speaker, best author, and podcast host. He has been known as the co-founder of LS1 Tech, an online automotive community which grew into the largest of its kind with over 300,000 registered members. This business sold for millions in only 5 years after starting. Amazingly, it was just his part-time business. Tony once led a successful corporate career with over 27 years experience in oil and gas. He has built and scaled project management departments and consulted with Fortune 100 companies on systems, processes, and leadership. Tony also has extensive experience in procurement and contract laws, as well as contract negotiation. In 2015, Tony decided to focus on building businesses full-time and left behind a multiple six-figure salary range to do what he loves. Tony and I met in a clubhouse room where I was very interested in the story he was telling. I thought that his demeanor and just his delivery seemed very sincere and natural. And the more and more I got to follow him and listen to him in rooms, the more and more I liked the message that he was delivering. To me, Tony is one of those people that has really done the work, became successful, created multiple businesses, sold multiple businesses, and now is out there helping other entrepreneurs follow their dreams and become successful. I think you're really going to like the content that we have in this episode. We talk about so many different things, but it is totally at the core of what I love about entrepreneurship. You're really going to enjoy listening to Tony. He's just a natural at the way he speaks and how he shares this information. And he's just my kind of guy in general. So please sit back and enjoy this interview with the man himself from 365 Driven and also the author of The Side Hustle Millionaire, Mr. Tony Whatley. All right, today my guest is Tony Whatley. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Joe, good to connect, and thank you for having me on the show, brother.
Yeah, man. So you and I connected on Clubhouse, and there is a tremendous amount of noise on Clubhouse, as with any platform once it takes off. And you stuck out to me because you're not one of those people that are leaning against a rented Lamborghini or sitting in a hollow, like a fuselage. And when I listened to you talk in certain rooms on Clubhouse, just something attracted me to wanting to connect more with you and learn about your story. So what I like to do with all my guests is I like to go back. I think it's important for people that become successful like you, that the people that are listening to this and who will eventually watch the YouTube video of this a few days after I release this on the platform, that they understand where you came from. Because I think that's always really important to know that you just weren't handed all of these things. And this just, with anybody becoming an entrepreneur, it's not an easy journey. So can you kind of bring us forward to today, but tell us where you started. I know that you got into oil and you had a regular career, quote, regular, giving air quotes for the podcast listeners. So if you could take us from the beginning, that would be awesome.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity. So my life grew up lower middle class, two hardworking parents, blue collar careers. My mom was a cafeteria worker in the public schools for over 30 years, serving kids meals. She had a really strong heart. She loved everybody, didn't dislike anybody, even some of the people I disliked. She was like, she could find the love in everybody, right? And my dad, Vietnam veteran, U.S. Marines, and after the military, he worked in chemical refineries here in the Houston area. The rest of his career, they're both retired now, doing really well. And I just learned the value of hard work and having to learn to be grateful for what I had. The houses that I grew up in, 3 houses specifically in Friendswood, Texas, was really the lowest income neighborhood in the entire city, which had affluence and also had lower middle class. A lot more of the affluence, but fewer of us. And we would basically buy the crappiest house and the smallest house in the neighborhood, and live in it while we flipped it for a few years, while we were restoring it, making it nicer. And eventually those small houses would become one of the nicer houses on the street. And then they would go buy a little bit nicer, bigger house because me and my sister we were growing just like the house sizes. And, so I just thought that was a normal life. I saw that there was affluence nearby. I could get on my bicycle and my skateboard and run around and look at these big houses that had a lot of windows on the front. I just remember being a kid and I only had one window on the front of my first house I grew up in. It was the one that was a bay window on the living room. And I would watch my sister, who was a year and a half older, get on the bus every day. And I would wave to her just like my mom. We'd be standing in the window. And that was always my view out of the house, the first house I grew up in. And I just thought that every house just had one view. So I just thought that was normal. And I remember when I became old enough to go ride around and leave the neighborhood and go see what was outside, I saw these big houses with multiple windows. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder what the view at that window looks like. I wonder what the view at that window looks like. And I could just envision myself running through this house and like looking through the windows and seeing if there's a different view in each one. And the funniest thing is my wife is a realtor. And sometimes I'll go do some showings with her and we'll be at these large houses and I'll still look out every window, even to this day. I'll still look out every window just to see what the view is.
That's funny.
And so I started catching myself doing this. Like, why am I so fascinated by what's outside each one? I was like, oh, now I remember. Now I remember. So yeah, a little bit about me.
Yeah. So how did you get into, so what did you go to college for some particular subject or degree or?
I went to college for the pursuit of the six-figure paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Like all of us.
That was the only reason.
Okay.
Because when I my first job was McDonald's at age 15. I worked there through high school. Then I was a busser at Olive Garden, and then I became a waiter there because I was a good busser. And then I went to work at a steakhouse where I was another waiter, and then I became a manager of this brewery steakhouse in Clear Lake, Texas. And I turned 18 and it really wasn't enough money to live on just working at the restaurant. So I actually started working in construction just like my dad and working in Texas and fire retardant clothing with a hard hat and 95-degree temperatures. It only took me a few summers of realizing that that's not where I wanted to be. I saw these men with collared shirts walking into air-conditioned rooms on the same facility. And I was like, well, what do they do? Well, they're engineers. Like, well, man, I need to figure out how to work in the air conditioning. Yeah. So I just said, hey, if you got to go get a six-figure career, that's what we tell you. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Well, I happen to love cars. So I said, well, maybe there's something in engineering that I can learn about cars and I can maybe go get that six-figure paycheck. So I became a mechanical engineer and I worked full-time during that whole ordeal. I paid for school myself. I was actually the first person in both sides of my families to go to a university. You know, my dad was the first one in his family to move to a house that didn't have wheels attached to it. And, so I was the first one to go to the university. So I really applaud him for, not going back to his hometown after he got out of the military and just deciding like, I don't want to grow up there. I don't want my kids to grow up there. We're moving somewhere else. So he went where the work was and he facilitated that change. And I felt like it was my obligation to do, a little bit better for him for the work that they put in. Isn't that what we all should be striving to, is trying to do a little bit more than our parents who struggled to put us in that situation? And so, me getting that degree, it took me 7 years. I was going to school at nighttime, usually between 6 and 10 p.m. and sleep deprived and broke and stressed out, and actually had more gray hair in college than I do now. Is strange because it really is sleep and stress. It really does has a lot of physiological turmoil on us. And my relationship struggled back things. I just didn't have any time to dedicate to those kind of things. But I never changed majors. And I never quit. I did drop some classes along the way because I struggled and my grades were suffering at the points but I didn't quit. And that was a testament to me, is like, I'm going to see this through, because I actually had friends that joined mechanical engineering program. Well, honestly, even when they tell you that when you start freshman year of school, they said only 20% of you are going to graduate. And then they said, okay, well, how many of you have a girlfriend or boyfriend, or you're married? And then raise your hand. I remember the orientation freshman year, and I said, okay, well, only 10% of you will graduate. And they said, how many of you are working full-time job to do this? And I raised my hand again. I said, well, only 10% of you will graduate. So I was like out of a 20% pool, 10% of that and 10%. I had really bad odds, but you know what? I'm pretty defiant. And I said, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to be the one that defeats the odds. And upon graduating, there was only 12 people in my class that graduated that semester, and I
Crazy.
was the only one that was working full time. So I really did defeat the odds. And I thought that I wanted to go into automotive career, but automotive in Detroit just didn't pay nearly as much as oil and gas in my hometown of Houston. So I decided to just take the paychecks in Houston, and that's why I started businesses in the automotive performance arena, because I still wanted to satisfy that itch.
Right. So you ended up taking a full-time job in the oil and gas world. What was that job?
Earliest was a project engineer role working for a manufacturing facility. We built subsea equipment, and pay back then was probably 45,000 base salary, entry level at that time. So for context, this was around 1997, 1998. And I was getting home at 4:30 in the afternoon. Like most people with a 40-hour job, we started really early in the morning, but I get home at 4:30, and I felt like after going through 7 years of hustle and grind and working 3 jobs, I was still a waiter, working construction as a mechanic. And I said, this feels like a part-time job. So here I am with my big boy salary and my big boy degree, feeling like, okay, I guess I'm on my journey. I'm on my early journey to go chase the American dream, and I've done it. And man, I was just bored. I was
Yeah.
bored, and I would be really honest with myself. I'd look at my small apartment, and I bought myself a nicer car. I bought a Pontiac Trans Am when I graduated. So that was like my reward to
Hmm.
myself. And I felt like, is this it? This isn't enough. This is not enough. And I got a lot of energy and I got a lot of time. So I actually went back and waited tables at the restaurant that I was a manager of, because I had promoted one of my friends to be the manager when I left. And I called him up and I said, hey man, do you think I could just come pick up shifts and bartending and waiting? He's like, hell yeah, dude. You're awesome. Like, come back anytime. I don't even need to put you on the schedule. Just come pick up whenever. And so for me, that meant 7 nights a week. I just, I put the apron on, and a lot of the people that were still working there knew who I was, and I graduated, and that's why I left. And they go, why are you back? And I was like, well, cause I'm not where I want to be.
Hmm.
Like I could sit home and sit on the couch and watch TV, or I can come back and make an extra 100, $150 a night. So I chose to go suck up my pride and go do that. That's the thing is, I've never felt shame for doing what was necessary to get what I needed to do.
Yep.
And I think a lot of times people put ego or self-importance above what they need to do. And, I was fine. If I was cleaning the bathrooms at McDonald's, I did it the best I could. If I was mopping floors, I did it the best I could. And even as a kid, I go back and some of my long-term friends like, dude, you just never complained. You just did what was required. Like football coaches would tell you something, you just do it. I've just never been the complainer. And it's because I watched my parents work so hard, and we literally were living inside of a flip house the entire time. And I just know that blood, sweat, and tears is not just some cliche phrase. And I learned from my dad, like, hey, he's a combat vet. Like, you should see what I had to do when I was 18, son.
Right.
Like suck it up,
Yep.
go do the work, don't complain. You have it better than a lot of people in this world. And that's the mentality I adopted as a kid, and I grew into a young adult, and I still carried that with me today.
So you're at this job, you're doing part-time at the restaurant, and when do you decide, and is the first side hustle that you start, is it LS1 Tech? Is that what it was?
Now, actually, my first side hustle, this is going to get really nerdy, but I learned how to build electronic circuits with resistors and little breadboards and soldering. And I was kind of geeking out on this. And I learned how to design a device that you could plug into an engine harness on a Camaro or a Corvette or Trans Am that would fool the knock sensors and give about 10 horsepower. So it basically would give it a little bit more ignition timing. And it was a plug and play thing, and I knew how to design it, and I built it. And so I would go to Radio Shack back when those were everywhere.
Yep.
I would buy all the resistors, and I would buy these little circuit boards and little boxes and the wiring, and I would buy the GM harnesses from the parts counter at the local Chevy dealership. And I'd get home and I would bust out my little kit and I would solder things. And it would take me about an hour to build each one of these units. And I probably had about $30 in parts, and I can sell them for $75. And so it didn't scale very well, obviously, because there was only a limited market, hundreds of people that maybe wanted to buy that. and I can only build 2 or 3 a night without running out of time. And so that was my first online business. I actually built a little 1-page landing page is what we call it now, but it was actually, that's all my capability was back then.
Yep.
And I sold them, I could probably sell 6 or 7 a week, and it was like good beer money or side money. It was better than waiting tables, to be honest, because I could still make the same amount of time, but I could be at home. So that allowed me to leave the restaurants. And then I started building web pages. I taught myself how to code HTML, build really simple web pages, and do graphic design with Photoshop, and take some good photos and build web pages, because I started that. A lot of people out there, a lot of automotive performance shops and manufacturers didn't have internet presence at that time because they didn't have a website. So it's like, well, shit, I could trade my skills for car parts. So it's like a barter system. It's like, I can get free car parts if I build them a website. And that funded my car and my racing hobby, right? And so I got known for building these little simple 1 to 3 page websites, which I would have to basically lay out on Photoshop visually first, and then slice them and make the little buttons and like rebuild those slices into like what looked like a web page on the internet. It was a whole lot harder than it is nowadays. And I probably built 100 of those websites over a period of 2 years. And so I got known as like the guy that could build car stuff websites, and I would get paid or I would trade car parts. And I was hanging out on other communities at the time, and they weren't being managed very well. They're not paying their server bills. Things were getting crashed, and sometimes all the content we create would be gone. After you built all this how-to articles, and you're writing all the stuff that's free user-generated content, and finally we approached the owner of that website, and we said, "Hey, we see you've got advertisers. We know how much you charge because some of my friends advertise here. I've built their websites. Like, why aren't you paying your server bill? It's like $300 a month. Like, what's going on?" And rather than take that as constructive feedback from some of his best supporters, like a group of us, he said, "Well, if you guys think you can do a better job, go start your own." And it never even was a thought in my mind until he said that. He challenged me. And again, like, you don't challenge me. I'm the kind of person, if you challenge me, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to prove you wrong. And so I said, well, man, I could build websites, and I don't know much about servers, but I'm pretty sure I can figure out how to load some software on there, rent a server. That's pretty easy if I could read how to. And so that's what we did. Is like, 2 of us started a website. That was LS1 Tech. That was November 2001. So 20 years from this year. And we just started as a hobby, dude. It's like, this other site's it's not reliable. Let's just go start our own place to hang out. And my partner, John, and I, we just thought, if we can make $500 a month, which is the car note of the Trans Am I had and the car note of the Camaro SS that he had, it's like, that would be really cool. It'd be like we would have a free car just to hang out and have a place to talk about cars. And I've got a big boy job and a salary, and you've got your own too, and we don't need this. And it's just something we want to have fun with. And I like to illustrate that because, shocker. Yeah, that thing went on to earn hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in profit, and we sold it for millions in 2007, but was never intended to make millions of dollars.
Right.
A lot of people are like, "Oh, were you a visionary? And did you see all this?" And it's like, no, we just wanted to make $500 a month. But the main difference, why we became the number one in the category and why we really dominated the entire automotive forum scene, we set so many bars and taught those other forums and the BMW sectors and the Porsche sectors. We taught them how to monetize the audience. We taught them how to build a strong community and attract advertising revenue. So I had clients like Chevrolet and Cadillac and Goodyear and big name brands that were paying me to advertise on my website. So the main difference is that we treated it like a business.
Yep.
While it started as a hobby, we started seeing real dollars come in, and within 6 months, we were probably making $10,000 profit a month. And we're like, whoa, I think we need to go get one of those, what are they called? An LLC or a corp, or I think we need to go do that. And I think we may need to create a separate bank account instead of just paying ourselves like into our personal account. Like, so I love to share that because I want people to understand that you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be the best entrepreneur ever. You don't have to overdose on YouTube and podcasts and reading books and attending seminars. You got to just start. You just got to start, and you're going to improve with time.
Yeah. So the important things I want to touch upon about this before we leave the subject about LS1 Tech is how did you get the advertisers? Did you actually, one of you, go out as a salesperson, whether it was phone calls or in person, or did they actually hear about you and come to you and say, hey, we heard about your site, we want to advertise?
Man, this is a little bit going back to, we hear about personal branding all the time, right? Nowadays, it's
Yep.
like the buzz, personal branding, you got to build a personal brand. Well, I was already doing that, and so was he, because we were active contributors to an existing community. So to put that in today's context, we got Facebook groups, you've got online communities. Go join those communities and actually be a contributing, valuable member that's always helping people by answering their questions and giving encouragement and giving advice and sharing your resources and sharing your network. And then you start to build that personal brand of being someone that creates value rather than asking for all the stuff. And whenever it comes time for you to go launch your own community, or write a book or launch a podcast or whatever that's your side of the fence, guess what? You're going to have a really strong group of supporters that, you know what, this person, I like them because they're always helping and they've always never asked me for anything. So here's the thing they're finally asking me for. I'm going to go support that. And that's the way it worked. And I didn't understand that. It's just my nature to be that person. I'm the person that if I'm on social media or a forum or anything that I'm spending time on, if I see somebody ask a question that I know the answer to, I'm not going to be the person that goes, well, you know what? Somebody else can answer that because I don't have time or I'm just super important. And,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's too trivial of a question for me to answer. I'll let some beginner answer that one for them. No, guys, if I'm scrolling and I actually see someone that needs help, I respond. If I have the time, I respond. And and it takes me a few seconds, but those few seconds of me investing into that pay dividends if there's a few seconds here, a few seconds there, a few seconds there. And people start to see, because what you don't understand is on the social communities, especially on the internet, is that thousand people will see that response over a period of time. Let's say you're in a Facebook group and somebody asks a really good question and you happen to have the answer, even if you think it's trivial or it's beginner, but you answer it, thousands of people will see that exchange of information. They will see who asked the question. They will see who answered the question. And if they start to see this pattern showing up over and over, hey, Tony is always helping people. He's always answering questions. You don't think that's building you some kind of a personal brand capital that you'll be able to use later on if needed, because you may never deploy that, but if needed, it's going to be there for you. So, that was how we built the advertisers, because we were helping the manufacturers on other sites by answering some of the technical questions. I would buy those parts. I would install those parts. I would do a how to. I would give the good and the bad of it and do a little review of those things. And we just answered questions on websites. And when it came time to go launch our own website, we were such contributors that they're like, we're going to go see what they're doing, what's that's about. And we'd already established relationships with people who are willing to advertise. So we actually had 10 advertisers in the first week. And I was not the cold caller. My partner, John, he owned a technical recruiting agency, and he loved to call people on the phone. And I was like, that is not me. I will build the websites. I will create the graphics. I will set up the servers. I will run things at a technical level like an engineer, and I'm a project manager by trade by that point. It's like I'll plan things out and execute. And he was the one that was going to make the calls. I was okay emailing, but I still, even to this day, I don't like making cold calls, and I don't. I
Right.
just don't.
Right. So the timeline now is you're doing your day job, project managing in the oil and gas arena, and you have this website with your friend, and you are selling advertising, you're building, and it's basically, if it looked the way it did then that it does now, it's literally a forum that you guys built. But now it's probably expanded, where I see it has the marketplace and it has all these other pieces of it that's helping to build, that whole infrastructure on that site.
Yeah, definitely. We had access to all the activity logs of each the forums that we created, so we could see the response of the individual categories that we put in the community. And the classified section, we were actually one of the first ones to do a classified sections in a forum, in an automotive forum, especially because we realized that hot rodders have used parts to sell. They always want to upgrade, or they're looking for a better this and that. So we put this classified in there so people could list their used parts, not new parts, because if they want to sell new parts, they need to be an advertiser. But the used parts, we were fine. And we saw that really increased the longevity of their visits by about 40%. And just to give you guys a context of how busy this site was, on average, we had about 100,000 unique visitors per day.
That's insane.
So if you're thinking about a speed shop or a car dealership or anything like that, imagine what 100,000 people walking through your front door every single day and spending an average of about 20 minutes looks like. That's how we were able to generate the advertising revenue, because we had the data logs, we had the Google Analytics, and we say, hey, what are you guys spending on magazines and television ads? And they go, oh, we're spending 5,000 for a half page ad and this automotive magazine. Okay, cool. That automotive magazine has a circulation of about 250,000 copies per month. We see that in 2.5 days, and we're going to charge you 10% of what they charge. And they were like, whoa, like this is a no brainer. And I said, even better, you don't have to give us content 30 days in advance ahead of publication, because there's that waiting period for publishers to print magazines. And they have to have the content editors and make it all look pretty and put it all in the pages and number the pages. And I said, so if you wanted to do an unveil of a product, you could actually show up that day and your representatives could log in with their account and post a video or something that they've created that day. And you could get real-time feedback from the people who see it and give you questions and maybe even pull out their credit card. So, forums and things like the things I created, we really were the commercial demise of magazines in that regard. And we've seen the magazines and publications struggle. But here's the thing, as much as I love magazines, and I was a contributing editor for most of the automotive magazines for over a decade, what they failed to do was adapt. They had the brand name, they had the readership, but they were like, you know what, we are super important and we're the media and we are magazines and nobody's ever going to replace magazines and we're just super awesome. And that forum stuff, that's just a waste of time, internet fad. And really, this is the kind of conversations that we would have with these publishers. Like, hey, we're trying to partner up with you. How about we build out your forum and you've got the audience base, you can start mentioning it in your magazines and, get them to drive to the forum and we can help you monetize that. And they're like, oh, no, we're not interested in that. Our business model is publicating and our ad rates are much higher than yours. So we make a lot more revenue than you. And guys like me put them out of business. Guys like me sold my brands for millions of dollars when they went bankrupt. So that's a good lesson in adaptability and understanding that you have to go where technology is telling you to go.
Same thing with the newspapers, right? They didn't move quick enough. Yeah. Same thing. Yeah.
They have the audience.
I know.
And they don't use it.
It's crazy. Okay.
I mean, they had it.
So I don't want to harp on this subject too long, but I want to make sure that the audience understands the exit route and how that happened out of this. And so still at this point, you still have a dual career, right? You're still working and you still have this website. It wasn't like this website took off so much that you decided that, okay, I'm not doing the day job anymore.
No, and that's one of the things people ask me is, why didn't you quit your job? When we were really the last 2 years that we were owning this website, we we're making about 400,000 a year profit. And people are like, well, why didn't you quit? Because at that point, my job was probably making 150, 175 range. And I said, well, I also work offshore. I did a lot of offshore construction. So sometimes I was gone 28 days, sometimes with internet, sometimes without. And so me being a project manager and engineer, I was very well adept at writing processes and procedures and systems that other people could follow. It's what I did for a career. And I said, I need to fire myself. So how can I create processes and systems to be able to hand these to other people that can do these in my absence? Because can't guarantee if I'm going to be there or not. And so that's what I did is we started to build a team. We had about 75 people on the team. And we paid them in perks and free car parts and sponsorships and sometimes, $10.99 just to do certain tasks. And that's what I did is I fired myself. And what that did is allowed me to use my website as a consumer now. So I get to be at the same ground level and see what the problems were and what we could improve on and how we can add more features to attract more eyeballs and more time on screen. And a lot of things that Facebook and Instagram do nowadays, we were doing a long time ago. We just had to do it manually versus, with AI. So that's what we do is we try to always focus on how can we increase engagement, how to increase eyeballs, how to increase time on screen, and what was the hot topics and what are the things that we can do to create content that was going to keep them coming back, because the value proposition that needed to exist for them to be entertained or get some information. And there's a reason my website is still existing and I sold it. And it's still the number one General Motors website to this day. It's been 20 years. But the thing is that I didn't quit the job because I didn't need to. And it goes back to that scarcity mindset that I grew up with, that if I can work the career and make, 150,000 plus. Like, why would I quit that? Because one, we were the top of the market share. We're number one. And there were always people trying to take us down. There were literally hundreds of copies of our website, always trying to take us down, but we were way ahead of these people. Right. And so I had the market share. Me working 1 hour a day versus 8 hours a day was not going to, 8x my revenue. It wasn't going to increase the revenue at all. I had the market share.
Mm-hmm.
So the hours versus multiplication just wasn't there, right? I was realistic about that. I could have been lazy and played PlayStation at that time or Xbox 360 and built cars and done nothing. But why would I do that? It's like, again, I wasn't where I wanted to be at the time. So I was okay stacking money, working the career. And also I had to struggle to get that engineering degree. And for a long time, I felt like I didn't want to waste that effort. I built it. I spent this time and investment and the hardship I explained earlier. And I said, you know what? I don't want to waste my degree. I was pursuing the corporate, the executive path in oil and gas eventually. So I was very good at my career and I was very good at entrepreneurship at the same time. And I always find that was fascinating because I saw my entrepreneur friends on one side of the fence and I saw my employee friends on the other side of the fence, and the mindsets are completely different between the two. And I would try to cross over. So I was what you would call an intrapreneur, someone who's an entrepreneur that works within a corporation to try to always enhance, improve, evolve. And I was always met with resistance, especially the larger the company names game. I was working for major oil companies in my later career. I mean, I left in 2015 and it was always like, hey, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. This is the way we've always done it. Like all these things that make corporations collapse.
Same old thing. Yeah.
Same thing over and over and over. And it drove me nuts. But yeah, that's why I never quit, man. I was good at doing both.
Okay. So how did the approach happen to buy the website?
Man, that's a funny one because at the time, very few people understood the amount of volume and dollars that was coming through a business model like that, because they just thought, oh, it's a cool car site. People are hanging around making, talking about cars. They're probably making, 50,000 a year doing this. That's probably what they're thinking.
And I have to make the point that when you did this, it was hard to do what you did. It was not the drag and drop and all of that stuff. It was not easy because I grew up. I was telling a story the other day. I used to teach companies how to use an internet browser. Like yeah. I'm old enough that
we're from the same era.
Well, I'm probably older than you, but anyhow, you did this at a really hard time. And when you're talking about the construction of the site, and then on top of it, being smart enough to keep all of the logs and Google Analytics. I mean, it's hard to use today. I can't even imagine what it was like when you were trying to pull the data out when you did it. So I just wanted to make that point. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think people need to understand that you have to put it into the context of when it happened, and it was not easy at the time that you did it.
Yeah. For context, I sold the website in 2007. And I was 34 and multimillionaire, and Facebook and Instagram came out 2 years later.
There you go.
See, so everything that you see now easy, like I could just do a video and I could do targeted ads and I can find all these people. Like we didn't have that. We had to rely on joint ventures with media and racing events and in-person type events to be able to really build the snowball of momentum.
Mm-hmm.
There was no like buying targeted ads, and it's super easy nowadays. Like really the excuses nowadays for entrepreneurs to not have success is like, it just makes me laugh. It's like, come on, it's never been easier. The information has never been easier to find. All the stuff is being shared nowadays, which we had to go learn ourselves the hard way. And, so the approach, going back to the question of the approach. So it wasn't uncommon for people to casually email us and go, hey, you think about selling your website? And we never really thought about it, to be honest, because we're doing pretty well and we didn't need to sell it. And we were really taking a lot of the profit, just rolling it back into the company to make it grow because we had careers. And so they would always, just out of curiosity, when someone's, hey, would you like to sell your website? We always would entertain the question. We always say, well, what do you think it's worth? Because we're curious ourselves.
Sure.
We didn't know anything about valuation.
Right.
Like, what do you think it's worth? Like, what's your offer? And most of them would be like, I always think of like Dr. Evil, when he talked about the $1 million, like this, and it was like, you got to go watch that movie if you don't know what I'm talking about. But they'd be like, how about $100,000?
Right.
thinking like, man, we sold advertising packages for bigger than that. Like, did you want to buy an ad package or did you want to buy the
Right,
website?
right.
And and it just shows you that they had no clue. And that probably happened a dozen times over a period of quarters. And we just kind of laughed about it. Like they don't know, and we're not going to tell them what we're making because they just have no clue. And this one company came in and the eventual buyers were a little bit different in their approach. And they said, hey, we're looking at acquiring the top level forums in each brand marquee. We've already bought this one, this one, this one, and this one. And all of those brands we were well recognized with. Like it was the best BMW site, the best Volkswagen site, like top level names on par with the one I'd built for General Motors. And I was like, whoa, if those people sold, then maybe there's something to this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember having this conversation with John and I said, man, we're kind of getting long in the tooth on this. I want to go build on some different projects. I want to do something different. And, what do you think? And he's like, we were both on board. Like, if they make us this offer and we came up with a number, right? And I said, if they come up to this and we can negotiate with this, I think we both agree that we'll sell. And it's like, cool. So we responded back and said, we'd entertain this offer. What kind of questions would you like answered? And they actually asked if they could put their Google Analytics pixel into our website so they could see for themselves if we're full of shit or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, no problem. So I put it in there, helped them put it in there. And then about 2 weeks later, they called back and they said, we're ready to have a discussion with you guys about the moving forward. And it's like, okay, cool. And so their initial offer was double our number that we had come up with in our mind.
Oh my gosh.
And we're like, oh, so we had to contain our excitement, first of all,
right.
and act like, oh, okay, well, we'll consider
Right.
that. We're going to have a talk about that and we'll get back to you. And the first thing I said is like, John, we need a lawyer. We need to get an attorney that's good with M&A. And we need to have some conversations with him on these early contract negotiation things. And of course, luckily he had a good friend of his that specialized that in Chicago. And we got on the phone, we talked a couple of times, went through some details of the preliminary offer. And he's like, so you're going to counter, right? And we're like, well, should we? And he's like, yeah, their first offer is always their lowest offer. Like, what do you want to make? And so we'll say, well, what about this number? And he's like, worst they can say is no. And so we put that back out to them and they said, sounds good to us.
Wow.
And we're like, damn it, maybe we should ask for
right.
some more. So of course we're not going to be greedy because it was already double our number in our mind, and we up sold them. And then they said yes. And we said, cool. We went down that road, and it was about a 1 year due diligence phase of going through all the accounting and understanding all the systems and processes in place and negotiating the contract and the details. And that was I would say a semi-stressful situation.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Even though that like millions of dollars is looking in your mind, you don't really think it's real. And actually, because I actually interviewed somebody on my show yesterday that sold a 9-figure exit, and he and I had very similar, even though he was a whole different range of the money I made, very similar psychological things going through your mind, because it seems fake until you see it in your actual bank account.
Yep.
And even when you initially see it in your bank account, it still feels a little fake until you like spend it a little bit and you're like, it's real. Okay. And they're not going to call me back and say, oh, we made a mistake, we need to have our money back.
Right.
So there's these weird things that we go through when we exit companies, and only 1% of businesses actually sell. And to hear this kind of experience is very rare. But I wanted to be really transparent to show people that, because it's very intrusive to go through that. Your books better be damn right.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you can lie about things that your company is doing or not doing, you're going to get discovered during that, because lawyers get involved and they're digging through all kinds of stuff. I mean, they're literally looking for ways to devalue your company, and you're looking for ways to add value to your company during that 1 year process. So you just got to be transparent about things and keep your books in order. That's the main thing, and learn how to build valuation in your companies. And it just turns out we were just doing everything right. We had the recurring revenue business model. We had pre-sold ads. We were cash flow positive. We had proven database of information of users and their emails and their names, which increased valuation based on customer acquisition cost. It would cost them to go find those people in the same market. So we had a lot of things that were checking the boxes. And it was also a tech platform with a really strong brand, which also increased valuation. So we just did everything the right way. And the reason we did that is because we just did things like business again. It wasn't a hobby to us.
Yep. So, You get to the final stage, it gets sold, they buy it, you sell it, you're still working. How long did you stay at your job once you exited this company?
Another 8 more years.
8 more years?
8 more years.
Wow. That was
Yeah,
not the
I
answer
actually
I
had it,
expected.
dude. I had spinoffs. I had verticals that I created from that acquisition. I had a retail company selling wheels for cars because one, we didn't have an advertiser that was selling wheels, and I was referring a lot of business out the door. And I said, man, I could just do the buy-ins and get another LLC and create my own wheel company and sell the wheels. And that became a seven-figure business on its own. And when the website came up for sale, I said, "Do you guys want the retail side?" And they're like, "Oh no, we just want the data. We want the assets. We don't want anything to do with retail." They were a marketing house.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "So I could just create another LLC and keep this business to myself." And so I did. So I still had a seven-figure business even after that. That was part-time, that I enjoyed, that kept me in the industry, kept me relevant, kept me engaged in cars. And so, but I was also in that pursuit of becoming an executive within oil and gas. That was my goal. And I was really good at navigating that. And I made it to where I was making about 250,000 a year in salary. And near the end of that, I started to realize that the oil industry just doesn't treat people as good as they should. And I started to have to be that person that had to make tough decisions on employing certain people, and even if they were high performers. And I got to see a lot of shady things in HR, the things that are unwritten that we always hear about, like ageism and like cutting people before their pension fully
Oh
hits,
man.
because it's a financial decision. It's not personal. And I got to see this multiple times, and it started to impact me. And it's like, what? I don't want to support another industry that does not support people. That we're basically disposable. And when I was young and disposable and making less money, it was very easy to find me a replacement job because it was inexpensive and unexperienced. As I started to make, multiple six figures, and in my 40s, if I were to get laid off, it was typically a 6 to 8 month sitting on the bench waiting for the next bus to come around type scenario. And a lot of times I was having to fire myself and put people in my desk that was 10 years younger than me and $100,000 less income than me, just to keep the bench warm for me to return if the market turned around. I was like, I don't like being in this situation. And so, it took a near death experience for me racing cars to finally realize, like, I don't want to go back to that. And I need to go create more impact in the world. And that's what I did. Is I decided I need to go teach people what I have passions for. And one was cars, which I built a lot of success in cars. The other thing's always been entrepreneurship. And so I said, okay, that's how I'm going to best impact this world, is teach people business and confidence around being an entrepreneur. And that's what I've been doing since 2017. It took me 2 years, even after leaving my job, to think about what I really wanted to do. Was it a nonprofit? Was it a philanthropy? What is it that I wanted to do? And for me, I just love to be a teacher. So that's why I do what I do now.
So do you, I've thought about this question a lot in regards to you. If the site didn't do what it did and you didn't sell it and make that kind of money, have you ever thought about where you would be today?
Yeah, I would still be working in the oil and gas industry for sure. For
So
sure.
with listeners and viewers that will hear this, what would you say to them if they were to say, well, you did the work. It wasn't like you got lucky, but you got lucky in the sense that someone wanted to buy it, right? And
Yeah, it wasn't for sale.
right.
So you're right.
So if someone's saying, well, what's the chances of that happening to me? Or if that doesn't happen, then I do have to just continue the path that I'm on. So what would you say to them about not getting a lucky break like that? How do you create that break for yourself to then become this entrepreneur and service the world and do good things?
I mean, honestly, my book, Side Hustle Millionaire, teaches people how to take the ideas for businesses and create reality out of those, because I was always asked, hey, what do you think about this business idea? And what do you think about this? And the thing is that too many people take pride in having ideas. They think that they're super smart. They think they're a genius because they have this idea. And you and I both know that thousands of people die every single day with brilliant ideas that take them to the grave that were never materialized. And so ideas really aren't worth anything until you take any actions and see some results from those. So don't give yourself too much credit if you're listening to this or watching this, if you've got an idea, unless you try it. And it's okay to fail. Sometimes failing is actually the best lessons, but for people who are employed, when all your bills are paid, you need to start thinking about what the number is. And the number is, what is the bare necessities you need to be able to sustain your lifestyle or even downgrade your lifestyle? Let's be honest, because a lot of times people live above their means. What is the number? And I'm thinking a dollar number. What is the actual number? Like, take your rent or your mortgage, your car note, your insurance, your food, your utilities, and put them on a spreadsheet and go, this is the number. And if it's 2,000 or 3,000 or 10,000, whatever that number is, you need to have that number in your mind, because once you start to make a profit in your side business that meets or exceeds that number, you need to really force yourself into a decision moment. Like, you need to know that number. It's so important to know that number, because a lot of times we find that side hustlers and people that do things on the side will exceed that number, but never force themselves into a decision mode. Because the question that you have to have in this decision is, should I just drop my career and go full time with this? And I have to have reasons to do that, right? Like, you heard me give examples of why I didn't leave, because it wouldn't have increased my income.
Yep.
Like, I was the number one in the category. I had all the market share. The extra hours would not have translated to extra dollars. It made no sense for me to leave. Now, if you do have a company and you realize that, hey, if I can contribute 8 extra hours, maybe 9 hours, if you have a commute to go to work, if I can commit 9 extra hours a day to this business, what do the numbers look like? Does it scale? Does it make a higher profit? Because I'm already at the number. I could actually leave right now. I actually have a parachute on my back that I could deploy, that it's going to replace my salary already. So why am I staying here? And if the answer is like, yeah, extra hours will increase the business, it will also increase your freedom and your confidence. And most people really don't understand the confidence that entrepreneurship brings, because they've never experienced that. There's something beautiful about commuting to your coffee maker and walking to your office in your own house in your pajamas.
Amen.
and waking up, like, you fire up the email and you go, oh, I made $3,000 last night while I was asleep. I mean, it just sounds so unrealistic, but the reality is realistic. And when you start to surround yourself with people who are doing it and who can teach you how to do that, your eyes just start to open up and you go, wow. I remember thinking $85 an hour at work was like a lot of money, because that's close to a $200,000 salary. You know, I remember negotiating, like, they wanted to give me $80 an hour. And I was like, oh, I want 90. And, well, how about we meet in the middle of 85? I mean, it's like, you know, was that 180, 200 range if you do the math? And the thing is there's this perception that multiple six figures is a lot of money in corporate, and it is, because I get it. The average income in the United States is $67,000 a year. Some people will never make $100,000. It's sad to me, because I can make that in a weekend now.
Yeah.
And had you asked me 20 years ago if that was possible, I would have laughed. It's like, there's no way you can make $100,000 in a weekend. That just sounds stupid. Like, you're dreaming, you're get rich quick, you join some kind of network marketing or whatever. Like, it's bull crap, Tony. But now I've done it a couple of times. Like, why did I ever have these limitations on income, and why did that exist? And you start to think about where that comes from. It's because of your supervisors, from your parents, it's from your teacher, your professors. They're telling you what they think you're worth based on what the market will bear. Oh, you're a mechanical engineer? Well, you can make $150,000 if you work 20 years. So, okay, so your self-worth becomes, well, I can make $150,000 by the time I'm 60, and maybe they'll give a bonus to me on my last 5 years as an attaboy, and I'll get a Rolex.
Right.
Why the hell do we give Rolexes to people that are retiring? Like, why do they need to be on time anymore?
Exactly.
Like, thank you. Why don't you give me the Rolex when I'm 20, so I'm always on time, right? So it's a lot of weird things that were created in these boundaries, and so people tend to define their self-worth based on a limitation of their salary, their profession, which is really sad. It's really sad.
Yeah.
And none of these limitations exist in reality. It's that there's no such thing as a limitation. And when you start to hang around people that think like I do, you're going to challenge everything you believe. And it's going to be really hard to unwind a lot of things that we're screwed up with, but it's crazy, the reality that really exists.
Yep. And this is why I do my podcast, and I openly admit it to people, is it's because it's a selfish endeavor for me to be able to hang out with people like you and just virtually rub elbows. And at some point, hopefully we meet in person, but that's the goal, is to change the mindset. I watched my father just work himself to death. He literally was, I forget if it was 2 weeks away from retiring, and had a stroke and was paralyzed on his right side. I watched him work harder than any man I ever watched. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to experience that. So I appreciate that. So you jumped ahead on me. which is great because I want to know. So here's 2017. You decide that you're going to do, you're going to
The
do,
coaching and
yep, the
the
coaching.
community building.
So
Yeah.
when did you decide to write Side Hustle Millionaire? When did you decide that, wow, I have to write a book on this? Because that's a big endeavor. Everybody I hear that has written a book says it's probably one of the hardest things they ever had to do.
The funny thing about writing the book, Side Hustle Millionaire was a idea in my mind 5 years before I actually wrote it. 5 years, because I knew, even because I was around 40 at that time, and I was like, I need to do something that helps more people. Before the internet flex on Instagram, I was the one that would post driveway photos with 10 cars and things like that, because one, I had some insecurity issues and self-validation things that I had to work through, and I didn't ever felt like I belonged with the rich people, and I had to prove that I could belong with them, and a whole lot of weird things that we grow up through. But besides, the point is I wanted to start teaching people how I got those cars, because the only people that were benefiting from that knowledge were my friends and like people I worked with, people within my close proximity. Because one, I didn't like being on camera. I didn't like being on stage. I didn't like my recorded voice, and had a lot of insecurities around that too. And I became highly successful kind of in the background, and I was fine with that. So anytime people are like, oh, you should go write a book, and you could teach all this stuff, I'd be like, oh man, but I'm so busy, and I've got a kid and a wife, and I've got a career, and I've got this retail company. And I would just make a list of bullshit excuses of things why I wasn't really serving the purpose that I am on today. And it was all stemmed based on the fear of criticism, right? And so even when I go through this near-death experience racing cars and deciding that I need to impact the world, I was still approaching it from I need to make impact, but I was still being cowardly about my way of doing that, my method. And so I said, you know what? I could write a book, and that doesn't mean I have to be on a stage or a camera or radio or TV. And I can just write this book, and it'd be a good way that's affordable, it's portable, and I can get what's in my mind out to thousands of people. And so I decided in November of 2017, like, okay, I'm going to write a book. And I validated the idea and used my social media to ask what they would want from me. And I asked them what questions they would want answered. I was really good at using my entrepreneurship of validating a product before I spend time on it. I did that. I just applied the same principles to a book, which is another product. And while I was writing the book, my editor, Mike, I was giving him a chapter at a time to review. And he was like, man, this is going to be a good book. I can already tell, because he's helped a lot of people become bestsellers. And one day he's like, they're going to want to interview you.
You're like, oh no.
Yeah. He goes, you might be on TV, radio, podcasts. And I felt that stage fright again coming up. I was like, oh man, but I'm kind of a daredevil anyways. And I said, you know what? This is a sign. This is a sign. I need to go take care of this fear. And so just like any other normal human with a fear or something or a challenge, like so just like most people with a fear of public speaking or any other challenge, they basically get on Google or they get on Siri, they ask, how do we overcome this? And for the results, it said, join a Toastmasters or join a Rotary Club, hire a speaking coach. I said, okay, this is something I have to do. And I actually was really, really avoiding this kind of scenario. So I joined Toastmasters. It's a nonprofit that teaches public speaking and leadership. And there's local clubs all over the world, and it's really inexpensive. I think it was like $45 for a whole 6 months. And I said, this is like a no brainer. So I'll try that. And so I said, if I'm going to go, I'm not going to be a spectator. I'm going to make myself really uncomfortable. I'm going to sit in the front row, and I'm going to raise my hand every meeting. It's like once a week, and just volunteer to do something in the front of the room and just make myself uncomfortable. And because I knew that the book was about 5 months out and I needed to get ahead of this. Right.
Yep.
So that's what I did so I would learn a new tactic of public speaking at a meeting. And then for the next 7 days, I would do videos. I would go on Instagram or Facebook and just practice what I was learning on public speaking to my phone. And it was really uncomfortable. And I did not, all those videos exist. They're like in May, June of 2017. And I basically I just did them every day. And that's how I improved. And I used to be so afraid of just doing videos. I would do them in my truck. Somebody walked by in the parking lot, like an aisle away, I would put the camera down and act like I wasn't doing any videos, because it was so weird to go through that. And I would record myself like 10 takes, and I would finally get one that was the best I could do at that given moment. And I would share that one. And that's how I did better. And I did that for over a year. And Within 6 months of me joining Toastmasters and doing those reps and making myself uncomfortable and doing about a speech per month, I actually started competing and representing that club in the Toastmasters competitions. And I actually won and went 3 rounds. Like
Wow.
I was like fourth place in all of Houston, after doing the club level, then the area level, then I went to district, and it was crazy. So even after winning a couple competitions, I finally started realizing there might actually be something to this. Like I actually might be okay at doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me winning competitions to finally realize that. And like anything else that I get into, I just go all in. And to me, public speaking was the thing I needed to go get good at. And I focused on it, and I studied who I thought were the best speakers. And I learned from people, and I hired a speaking coach, and I did reps. And I actually became the president of that Toastmasters club. And I grew it to one of the largest clubs in Houston, and had about 50 active members at the time I was president for a year. So I got to go from being transformed to transforming hundreds of people that came in and out those doors for a period of over 4 years of being in that organization. And I've seen so many changes, and most people really underestimate the quickness you can change. And I would say for most Toastmasters, you could come in deathly afraid, and if you participate within 3 to 6 months, you'll be a completely different person. So it happens that fast. And I've seen it too many times to argue the results. So if you're out there and you're worried about public speaking or doing videos like this, or you have a fear of that, like, go join, make yourself uncomfortable, do the reps. And it is a skill. It's not a talent. When you hear someone speaking like I do now, it's not a talent. It's not something I was born with. It wasn't even a thought of my mind to be a public speaker, but I learned the tactics and the strategies of effective communication, and how to use my vocal inflections and speed and volume control, presence, hands, all the things that you never even think about are part of communication. You learn when you actually get coached, and it's a skill. It's just like learning a new language.
Yeah, and it was a real surprise to me because I actually heard you say that you had a real fear of public speaking I think it was a clubhouse room, because
Mhm.
you were giving advice to someone. And when you said that, I was like, that can't be the same person. I just, I didn't understand it. And I personally think, I come from the entertainment side of things. I own an entertainment booking agency here in Phoenix, probably one of the biggest ones here. So I was a performer my whole life. So it's not hard for me to necessarily do this, even though, yeah, a lot of people don't like how they look. They don't like how their own voice, all these things. But I think
Yeah.
you have a great voice. It's incredibly soothing the way. That's what I liked about how you presented yourself in those rooms. It wasn't like, I'm great. And, it wasn't like, there's a lot of people that just sort of yell, and they're like, that's how they get
I'm
their
super awesome. And for
exact.
$997, you can take a course that will make you a millionaire
That
in
is it.
3 minutes.
That's the person I'm talking
Just
about.
DM me
Oh
at
my gosh.
TonyMakesYouAMillionaire.club and
Right.
follow all the moderators up here, because they are super awesome, just like me. And they do their call to action, and they
Oh my
pitch
god.
just like me.
It's
Once you
perfect.
reach out.
Perfect. Okay, so 2017, you start to write Side Hustle Millionaire.
I started writing it. It came out in May of 2018.
Okay, great. And did you have to go do any sort of book tour type of thing? And
No, I built the online presence. I built the support community. I kept people engaged with the project by giving them excerpts of chapters, asking them for feedback. We did a cover design. We had like 9 cover designs. I helped use them to help pick the covers. So I let them become bought into the project, so they felt like they were part of it, because they were. That's my marketing skills coming out into the book, because I'm not like a well-known author. This is my first book.
yep.
And as a result, when it launched, we sold over 1,000 copies the first week, and it became a #1 bestseller. Then it moved to different categories, and actually become #1 in the small business category. And on the personal development, one of all personal development books on Amazon, which is like millions, it hit #11. I was really hoping to get in the top 10, but it hit #11 of all personal development books, which is crazy to think about. Like me, self-published, no publisher, first time author. The funny thing about this, Joe, is that when I decided to write the book, I'm big on vision boards, and usually it's the backdrop of my computer screen. I make a collage of things that I want to achieve. And
Yep.
when I said I'm going to write a book, I'm going to be an Amazon #1 bestseller, and people laughed. People I knew that were, I actually put the logo, the gold crest, right in the middle of the screen. So every time I fired up the computer or shut it down, I saw it. And most people laugh, but they underestimate me again, because to me, I understand there's got to be a process that's repeatable. There's got to be a way that really get the odds of achieving that. And being the engineer, I was like, okay, if that's the level of quality and the deliverable I want to create, I need to go find people who have done that and just ask them how they did it, get some coaching, pay them for their time. And that's what I did. And I found that editor who'd helped dozens of people achieve it. It was a process. It's like, this is what you need to do. This is the kind of format you need. This is how long the book should be. This is how you should write the book that will best translate to readers wanting to share the book. And so he gives you a lot of the psychological things in the cover design. This is the subtitle, needs to be in this kind of a format. Don't use these colors, use these colors. This is the size font that translates well, because we realize from what I learned from him is if people don't finish a book, like if it's too thick, because a lot of people want to write this giant book and like, their first book's like, it looks like an encyclopedia volume. And the thing is that he's like, do you want people to recommend your book? And I was like, well, absolutely. He's like, well, they got to finish the book. Because what he realizes is that nobody ever recommends a book they haven't completed. So we need to do things to make sure that this is a easy to digest, easy to read, easy to understand book that they will complete. That way they go, man, this is a great book. So there's a lot of stuff about book marketing and positioning and writing that most people take for granted.
I was going to ask this question, but I really want to get to 365 driven because there's so many things, and I know I've already gone over the hour, and I want to respect your time. So I'll ask you at another time. We'll do this again for sure. 365 driven. When did that come out in relationship to the book?
Well, the Facebook group was initially 40 entrepreneurs that I asked on my timeline. It's like, hey, I'm writing an entrepreneurship book. Would you guys like to be a part of this project? Looking for entrepreneurs to bounce questions and feedback on. And I thought it was going to be like 5 or 6 people that raise their hand, and 40 people are like, yeah, that's cool. And so that became the 365 driven group. It was originally the book support group.
Okay.
And as it started to grow, I mean, we're almost at 4,000 members now, and it's just grown organically. We just say, hey, if you're getting value, invite a couple of your friends. And that's just how it grows. Because I know that if I use the referral network, one, they kind of filter out the crappy people that are non-contributors. They're only going to invite their good friends. And so it's kind of grown that way and slowly over time, which I enjoy because it gives me a little more time to get to know the people that are participating. But that's the basis of 365 driven, because I built communities with hundreds of thousands of members. I'm still the same leader. I still understand the core values and the principles of leadership. I'm very comfortable in that role. But now instead of cars, I'm applying it to entrepreneurship because that's my impact. I want to have the impact legacy. So I fully expect my 365 driven brand to crest millions of members over time. And I'm patient enough to do that. I'm not like, hey, I'm going to expedite this and I need to just amplify and spend all this money. Like if it takes me 10 years to reach 1 million members, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Yeah, but it's going to happen. You can hear it in my voice. I'm very certain it's going to happen because that's just who I am. And I'm patient for the results.
Okay, so then the Facebook group starts. And before we get off the Facebook group, do you have to be a part of anything else to be in that Facebook group? Did you have to purchase something or anything?
A lot of them do come by way of listening to my podcast, 365 Driven, or reading the book because it has like a call to action. Hey, if you like what you hear, join here. So it's a free community. We do have paid versions. We have live events, and we have online coaching. We've got one-on-one coaching. We've got some accountability group type mastermind formats, like 6 to 8 person formats. So that's how we're scaling. And I'm training some other people to start running some of these groups. And we're just helping business owners getting the information that they didn't have.
Right. So outside of the Facebook group, all of the rest of that can be found on the 365driven.com website.
That's right.
Right. So that's the part where you can be a part of one of the events, get one-on-one coaching. And then you have the 365 Driven Society, which is, I would assume, the community that has gone through something of one of the paid things on the website.
Yeah, it's a low ticket group to get in. It's $365 for a year. So it is really just to separate the doers versus the talkers.
Yep.
And as funny as it sounds, like even $1 a day separator really starts to pull the cream of the crop. And, we always think about conversion rates when we're doing offers or webinars or things like that. And we say, hey, if you get 100 people to sign up, 3% will convert, 5% if it's good. That's the exact number. When we rolled out the offer for the 365 Driven Society for $1 a day, we had the exact same conversion ratio. We had that 3 to 5% target window. So even if a group of thousands of people, it's like, wait a minute, the numbers always seem to pan out. And when you get to that group of people who are just paid a minimal amount to be in it, they get more attention. We do group challenges. They've become lifelong friends themselves. It's a really supportive, strong network. And it's just funny how like just a little dollar value can make a big difference in the people.
Yeah, and what's more incredible is that people will go spend $4 and $5 on a latte, but not spend $1 on themselves. Right?
I'm telling you. I mean, we got multimillionaires and all kinds of business owners in the dollar a day group, and people just don't understand what they're missing out.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Well, I so appreciate your time. I'm sorry we had some little internet glitches here and there. I don't know what it is, but it was an honor to talk with you. I am a big fan. I hope someday we can hang out. I love what you're doing. It stands for everything that I love and want to do myself. I just haven't gotten to the point where you are, where you're sharing it and you have a great website and a great team and lots of followers. But I hope to somehow work with you someday. What's the best way for everyone to get a hold of you? What do you prefer is the best way to get in touch?
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words, Joe. And just realize that I'm just now entering year 4. And so you can do things and things can accelerate really fast. And the first year, I would say it was a little slow, but I was doing that daily video and helping people. And I didn't charge anything for the first year. And year 2, it really grew. And that's when I started to become well known. That's when I started charging. Year 3 definitely tripled what I was earning, even in the corporate level. But year 4, we're on to some incredible things. I mean, I just got assigned a deal for a potential TV show and all kinds of things that are going on now. So it's only 4 years in. So I believe in you, brother. If you got it in your mind to do it, you just have to outwork people.
Yep.
You have to outlast people. And you have to realize that momentum seems really slow at first. But the more you compound that effort and show up every single day and give love and value like you do, it's going to happen. You just have to see it. No one else is going to see it but you. That's one thing. So, yeah, but thank you for the opportunity. My website's 365driven.com. And from there, you'll find all my social channels, my book, my podcast, and the society. So keep it simple.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate this. I look forward to another one of these at some point with an update, maybe the TV show. You'll be a big star by then, and we have a lot more to talk about. But I could have gone on forever, but I really want to respect your time. So Tony Whatley, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and we will hopefully see each other live one of these days soon.
Thank you, Joe.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I want to thank you for listening to my podcast. I know you have many options to listen to various podcasts, and I'm honored that you chose to listen to mine. I would love it if you would rate my podcast 5 stars and write a nice review. It really helps to bring up the rankings of the podcast to other listeners. Once again, thank you so much for listening to The Joe Costello Show. I appreciate you very much.